Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Dean, and I'm a Senior Advisor on Climate and Social Justice and Climate at the Libra Foundation. I've held similar roles at the Nathan Cummings Foundation and the Hewlett Foundation, and also managed the Commission to Engage African Americans on Energy, Climate Change, and the Environment at the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. During the Obama administration, I served as Senior Advisor for External Affairs and Stakeholder Engagement at the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. During my time both at the Obama administration and the Nathan Cummings Foundation, I worked closely with Business Board, helping to organize policy briefings just like this one. I'm so pleased to moderate this panel on the climate crisis, and thank you for joining us. We have some great panelists with us today. They are Dr. Cecilia Martinez, co-founder and executive director of the Center on Earth, Energy, and Democracy, and one of my heroes. Lonnie Stevenson, the international president of the IBEW. Tom Steyer, founder of NextGen. And last but by no means least, Steph Feldman, the policy director for the Biden-Harris campaign. And before that, she served as a policy advisor to Vice President Biden at the White House. Cecilia, Lonnie, and Tom will each talk about how their respective organizations are addressing the climate crisis and promoting environmental justice. In doing so, they present three complementary views of climate action. They also help lead the Biden-Harris Environmental and Social Justice Working Group. So you will also hear about that group's work. Steph will speak last in part because it is up to our next president and the new Congress to empower environmental leaders in this country, like Cecilia, like Tom, like Lonnie, and like you. Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris have articulated a bold agenda for climate justice, but they've also made clear that this is something Washington cannot do alone. We'll go over all of those. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. You can participate by emailing your question to us at info@businessfwd.org, and I'll read it aloud during the Q&A. Couple of rules around that, best practices. Please include your business and where you live in your message so we know where you are. And again, that email is info@businessfwd.org. Please also note this call is on the record and there may be reporters present. I'd really love to thank our host committee sponsors, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, NextGen, and our panelists for making today's panel possible. So before we dive into the discussion, I'd like to have our panelists give a little background on themselves, their organization, and the great work that their organization is doing to drive climate justice. Dr. Martinez, Cecilia, could you please start us off?
Thank you, Danielle. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with all of you and with my distinguished panelists here. I do work on the intersection of economic development, community development, and environmental justice. And I just want to offer some thoughts from our environmental justice and climate justice community on how we can work together to build a brand new economy, to build off of what we've already done. And I think we know that here we are in the year 2020. What we look at this state of affairs in this country, I think we all know that we can do better and that we must do better. As in all critical moments in history, we are both in a time of intense difficulty and danger, and we are in a time of opportunity and bold new ideas. We are in a time when hard and important decisions must be made, and we are in a time when many of us are working together to fashion our best ideas to put into action. And as it's been said over and over, we are in a time of great division, but we are also at a time when we collectively are deeply understanding the responsibility of citizenship and what it means to create a better economy and society. I think, naively and arrogantly, we somehow were content to think that a retreat back into the darkness was not possible. And I think if we've learned anything recently, it's that the politics of racism and other injustices in the hearts and minds of some is as real as it ever was. But it is time to banish these old and outdated ideas and practices. And one of those is the old cliche of jobs versus environment. That notion that if you are for one and you are against the other is no longer true, if it ever was. Vibrant economies are ones that don't stand still. They innovate, they create new opportunities to address problems, and the more people participate in a creative and innovative economy, the healthier and more self-sustaining our families and communities are. The vision of Build Back Better, in our view, is fundamentally about moving forward and not regressing America back to an economy that opts out of taking advantage of the enormous and expansive innovations and labor workforces that we have in this country. It's also about banishing the practice of exclusion so that not only can we all share in prosperity, but prosperity itself is expanded when everyone can contribute and can benefit. And doing so in a manner that fundamentally ensures that all of us can participate and that all of our families and communities can live and work and play in an environment that is healthy and safe. And for that reason, I think many of us in the EJ and climate justice community have read the Build Back Better vision and plan and truly believe that this is a way forward. Even the name echoes what many of us have been saying. We can do better and we must do better. So thank you so very much for helping me to be a part of this panel.
And thank you, Cecilia. I will turn it over to Lonnie. Lonnie, could you tell us a little about you and your team's work at IBEW?
Yes, thank you, Danielle. I'm Lonnie Stevenson, International President of the IBEW. We represent about 775,000 active and retired members all across the United States and Canada. And our entire membership really is directly tied to energy in some shape or form. Particularly the members that work in construction and utility, which is about 85% of our members. They're directly affected on energy. And so along with that group, we have the power, we represent people in power generation, coal, gas, nuclear, hydro, wind, and solar. We also represent workers in the electric and gas utilities, transmission, construction, as I said, advanced manufacturing, transportation. We have railroad, public transit, shipbuilding, airports, electric vehicle infrastructure, and telecommunications. The IBEW members are working on the front lines of the climate change as we move into a cleaner environment. We're restoring the electrical service after natural disasters, hurricanes, fires, windstorms, you name it. We're the front line going in and restoring the power in those communities. Building and operating renewable and zero carbon power generation is also part of what we do. Modernizing the electrical grid, which is crucial as we continue to move into this new energy, as we have to have a reliable grid system that's going to be able to provide the resources to get the power really from point A to point B. It's that simple. And we have been working very close with Vice President Biden on energy, and he has asked for us our input all along the way. And we think the plan that he has put together is wonderful compared to what we thought, where we can continue to move. Because like I said, we have a lot of our members directly involved in this industry. And some of those jobs are going to change as we transform from one energy source to another. We also know that in the process, we still have to have reliable base load energy, because the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. So we have to make sure that we have a generation system that's going to be able to back up and support when there's the peak demands in the country. And so we are, and also, by the way, excited to be working with Tom and Cecilia and the entire Climate Engagement Advisory Council. We've been had a few meetings now and continuing to work on that agenda and how we can move this forward. We also have been involved with what we call the LEAP, Labor Energy Partnership. And that's a shared commitment of the AFL-CIO and their Energy Futures Initiative, EFI, which was started by former Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz. The IBEW and other energy unions that we work with are excited to work with Secretary Moniz and his team to develop energy policies that will help promote economic equity based on quality jobs and preserve workers' rights while also addressing the growing climate crisis. Energy policy must be based on the science and acknowledges that climate change is real and a threat to human society as well. Successful and social solutions to climate change must be based on all of the above energy sources as we continue to move into the new generation of energy. Preservation of the existing jobs wherever possible is an essential priority, and the creation of new jobs. They must come back and they must be equal to or better, and make sure that there are good quality paying jobs in the new energy environment. And the climate policy must represent an economic opportunity for all of us in the United States. And we think there's also an opportunity for manufacturing. As all these renewables continue to come, there's going to be a real opportunity for growth in manufacturing, which is a huge part of the IBEW as well. And so we're excited about this. We're looking forward to supporting Vice President Biden and moving forward to support his energy policy into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lonnie. Next up, we have Tom. Tom, thank you again for joining. Good to see you again. Please take it away.
Thanks, Danielle. And I want to thank my friends Cecilia and Lonnie for their words. I will talk about NextGen, but I want to start by talking about why the three of us are working together in climate engagement and why we're on this panel together. This is going to be a transformational election. It has to be a transformational election because virtually everything that we care about is at stake. Our democracy, our country, and our planet depend on this election. Thank God that the moment has produced the right person in Joe Biden, and thank God that he had the wisdom to choose a fantastic running mate in Kamala Harris. As my friend Lonnie Stevenson said, Vice President Biden's Build Back Better plan is a positive vision for our country, and it's a win-win-win for our planet, for environmental justice, and for working people across America. This climate plan is a jobs plan, and this jobs plan is an environmental justice plan. That's why we're all working together. But let's start. This is an aggressive climate plan. We're talking about $2 trillion of infrastructure spending in the first 4 years. We're talking about 100% clean electricity generation by 2035 and a carbon neutral economy nationwide by 2050. That's aggressive. That's transformational, and we need that. But this plan also addresses the huge economic hole, the job destruction, the destruction of small businesses across America that are associated with this pandemic. This plan is about rebuilding America from the ground up. It's about talking about putting millions of people to work at good paying union jobs across this country and putting money in their pocket so they can spend it in their neighborhoods. And let's put some meat on those bones if we can. The Build Back Better plan contemplates 1 million jobs in the auto industry. It contemplates upgrading 4 million commercial buildings and weatherizing 2 million homes across America. Building 1.5 million homes, building 1.5 million sustainable homes in the country. But the whole point of this plan is it covers the bases together. It focuses on cleaning up the air and water across our country, particularly in the underserved communities, the Black and brown neighborhoods where this society has focused and concentrated its pollution from time immemorial. Joe Biden gets climate. I realized that backstage at the debates when we were talking about it, that he's knowledgeable and he's passionate. But more than that, he gets people. He cares about air pollution because he knows that asthma hurts kids. It diminishes their life going forward. He cares about energy generation, for sure, from a climate basis, but he has never talked about it in my presence without including the dignity of working people, about caring about every single person in a job who's trying to provide for his or her family and affording them the respect they deserve in that endeavor. He's never not caring about their rights and their futures going forward. He knows his stuff. He knows the science. But more than that, he knows what's at stake at every level. But let me talk for a second about NextGen. I mean, I am a grassroots person. NextGen is, I started it, it's the largest youth voter mobilization effort in the country. Lonnie and Cecilia and I are on the Climate Engagement Council. That's about reaching out to people about why this plan matters to voters and to citizens across this country. This election is going to be historic and transformational because of historic and transformational turnout. It's not going to be about convincing Trump voters that they're wrong. It's going to be about convincing and enabling people who agree with us that they should show up and vote. That is why we're going to have the greatest election turnout in American history, the largest number of people who vote in American history. And that's why we're going to get the most important sweep in American history. We've got the right candidates. We have the right message. We have a plan that speaks to the people across this country, working people, people in underserved communities. And now it's our time to turn that policy and those leadership into the biggest sweep in American history.
Thank you, Tom. It's so wonderful already to hear about the richness and diversity of the expertise on this panel. And I'd love to turn it over to a final panel member before we go to your questions. Steph, could you tell us a little bit more about what the campaign is doing in terms of tackling the climate crisis? And if you have any early responses to the panelists' remarks.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for moderating this panel. I am so lucky to be spending this afternoon with Cecilia, Tom, and President Stevenson, who are all incredible minds, incredible leaders for this country, and have dedicated so much of their energy to the Biden campaign. And I'm so grateful to all three of them, as is Vice President Biden. I started working for Vice President Biden about over 10 years ago now. This is quite a night. My vegan mint chocolate chip ice cream is in the fridge, chilling, ready for tonight. So hope everyone's getting excited. Onto the topic of the day, which is climate. I just want to set a little bit of context here. If Vice President Biden gets elected, he will be taking over in the midst of a number of crises worsened by President Trump. A public health crisis, an economic crisis worsened by President Trump's failure to get the virus under control, a racial justice crisis fanned by Trump's actions and hate, and a climate crisis worsened by Trump's outright denial that climate change even exists. That's a big challenge to take on day one of an administration, but Vice President Biden is the candidate, along with Senator Harris, prepared to take on that challenge. The vice president put out a climate plan toward the very beginning of his campaign, but last month put out what I think of as an addendum to his plan, which is really scaled up to meet the moment and to meet this challenge. This plan is designed to be, as Tom said, a jobs plan first and foremost, to pull our economy out of this recession worsened by President Trump's failure to get the virus under control, and not just pull us out and get us back to where we were before the virus or in 2016, but to bring us forward, to build us back better, meaning tackling the climate crisis and making sure that we're creating millions of good jobs that provide a choice to join a union at the same time. And on top of that, tackling environmental injustices and making sure that communities of color and low-income communities that have disproportionately borne the burden of climate change and pollution bear their fair share of the benefit of a clean energy revolution. Tom did a great job walking through the details of the plan, so I won't go back into that, but I will say that there are two things that I, as someone who originally got into politics in large part because of environmentalism, find especially exciting about this plan. First, the fact that the vice president has put it at the core of his economic recovery package, the Build Back Better plan. That means that this is not something that the vice president thinks would be nice one day in his administration to achieve, or maybe he'll get to it. But the vice president views addressing climate change as core to the job he has at the very beginning of this administration, which is to get our economy back on track and get our workers working. So as someone invested in making sure that we have strong climate legislation passed, that's a big deal to be put up front there. Second, this plan is designed to lock in progress and meet the demands of science such that no future president can reverse our progress. Overall, the vice president's plan is designed to put us on an irreversible path to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. And he will do that by having an accelerated investment, especially in infrastructure, so the president who comes after a President Biden is not unable to do the benefits. And here's what I mean by that. We've seen President Trump undo so much of President Obama's environmental policies, so many of the very important rules and regulations. But what President Trump has been unable to do is he's been unable to pull out the windmills. He's been unable to undo the improvements to the electric grid that President Obama made. Those are real infrastructure investments that can't just be undone by a next president. And that will be core to the beginning of the Biden administration. And then when you pile on top of that standards, such as the electricity standard and building standards, you'll create jobs and set us on a path that no future president can reverse. And that's what the science demands. So I'm excited. I'll stop there. I'm excited to hear what our panelists have today and chime in on the conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steph. I hear you on the snacks and must-see TV. I've been up, every single night. Each night has gotten better. And as someone with roots in the Caribbean, watching Kamala last night for that and so many other reasons was just so inspiring. So we have a question coming in, and Cecilia, I'll direct this first one to you. It's from Susan Smith. She's writing in from Salem, Oregon. And she asked, last year, environmental justice and environmental advocates got together and came up with an equitable and just climate action platform. And as someone that's on the Biden-Harris team working on outreach, this question is the Biden plan for climate change consistent with that equitable and just climate action program? And before you answer, let me just remind for others that are listening again, that email is info@businessfwd.org. Keep those questions coming. Cecilia.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and thank you for that question. Yes, absolutely. The short answer is yes, and absolutely. We were privileged, both myself and my organization, along with several of the national environmental organizations and environmental justice organizations of coalitions from across the country, to spend about 9 to 10 months developing together the Equitable and Just Climate Platform. And it's a historic document in the sense that it's the first time the environmental movement and the environmental justice movement came together and aligned around these incredible ideas. Now, what's really wonderful is that the Biden campaign and Vice President Biden himself has actually reached out and listened to the people who have fashioned that platform. So when you see his EJ plan and all of his plans in terms of Build Back America, Build Better, he's been listening to us. He's held listening sessions with many of the platform participants in the coalitions, and our ideas have been taken in, and we have been thrilled that we have been able to contribute to these plans. I think what was most critical and what was most engaging is when the Vice President himself told our EJ colleagues that, yes, he wanted to listen to them, but he was there to listen to them about the ideas that he could implement, that it wasn't about purely a political moment. It was about moving the agenda and getting these ideas right and moving into implementation. So we are thrilled that the Equitable and Just Climate Platform happened. It was a lot of work, and we are ecstatic that the Vice President has been able to use the ideas of these incredible people to move forward.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. I'll direct the next question to you, Lonnie. This is going to be a major transformation. And one of the questions is, how does the Biden administration, how are they planning to try to provide transitional support to many of the economically distressed communities outside of Appalachia? This might be one you want to weigh into as well, Steph. That's coming from Edgar Rivas, the House of Representatives in DC.
Well, I think as the new technologies and we move forward, we're in the position, along with the IBEW and other labor unions that's involved with energy as well, to have training programs available that we can help get some of those people that haven't been active part of, in a lot of ways, of our trades. We all have an initiative through the building trades. The IBEW has had an initiative now for about 4 years on having more diversity and inclusion within our construction branches. And so along with that, we've got, many local unions have developed programs where they can reach out to these, women and people of color early on when they're still in school, and letting them know that there's opportunities for them in the electrical construction industry. We have more line women and people of color in our line industry and our inside industry. And we know that as these new jobs develop, it's going to give us an opportunity to continue to have job opportunities for those folks and get them the proper training. We always have our training in place. And so we'll be able to modify and adjust and make sure that training is there, so we have more opportunities for people that, like I said, especially in some of these communities, have been left behind. So they've got an opportunity with the IBEW.
Well, I can't top President Stevenson on anything regarding union and training, but I will say, I think it is critical to the success of the Vice President's plan that the jobs created are union jobs. The unions are the ones who are able to train workers to be effective at their jobs, make sure that they're safe, make sure that they receive the pay and dignity and respect they need. So that's why Vice President Biden has included in his climate plan and in his Build Back Better plan, critical labor legislation like the PRO Act, which will expand rights to organize and collectively bargain. That's not something that we think can be done after we get our infrastructure spending going or after we get our clean energy spending going. That needs to be done in coordination with it to make sure that the jobs created are good union jobs. I will also say Appalachia has a special place in my heart. I actually spent some of the most brief but transformative time in my life in Eastern Kentucky and really love the community there. And I think that we both need to support the workers, but we also need to support the communities as a whole who are being affected by the energy markets and the transition in the energy markets. So that's power plant communities, that's mining communities. The Vice President has put forward a plan to invest in these workers to make sure that they receive the pensions and benefits that they deserve, but also to invest in infrastructure in those communities, to make sure the schools have enough money to rebuild their classrooms and to have educators still there, to make sure we still have firefighters in these communities. There's so much big investment we can do to tap in to these communities and the talent and the people there, and make sure that people can have a pathway to the middle class while staying in these communities and not having to go anywhere else if that's what they choose.
Thank you, Steph. Tom, this next question will be for you. It comes in from Erin Sherman from Ideas 42 in Odinson, Maryland. And you described yourself earlier as a grassroots guy, but you're also a business guy. And this question is asking, should there be or will you require disclosure of fossil fuel financing by banks in a way that consumers can understand and act upon? Should there be, or do you intend to regulate lending for and an underwriting of fossil fuel projects?
Well, Erin's right. I did spend 27 years in the private sector, starting in one room with no employees. And I do believe that in transparency in business. I do believe that it's important for people to understand where the big money is going and what they're supporting. So your question was, should we have a rule about transparency in terms of what big banks are lending money to. I think that it's always good to have transparency so people can understand what's going on and can understand the forces in society. The banks are incredibly powerful for financial forces that push us economically. And having people understand where that power is, where it's being directed, is something that I think is important for our democracy. I think that if you look at the numbers of these big banks, they're incredibly concentrated. Some of these banks have $2 trillion worth of assets, and understanding the decisions they make and where that's going is something that it's systemic. If they're too big to fail, then they're too big not to tell us what the truth is, because working people across this country, citizens, voters, deserve the right to understand what these huge financial institutions are doing, since in fact, their survival is dependent on the government that our tax dollars make possible.
Thank you very much, Tom. If they're not too big to fail, they're not too big to tell us exactly what they're doing. I like that one. So I'll let the panelists choose who might want to answer this question. And it talks about the fact that, of course, American leadership is critical. And as we look at regaining global leadership, we have a question from Jake Smith in Rockville, Maryland, saying, rejoining the Paris Agreement is critical on day one, yes, but it's insufficient on its own to address climate change. How is President Biden going to make climate change a top foreign policy agenda in the US, and what can he do concretely to go beyond Paris and drive even deeper actions across the world?
Absolutely.
Should I take a shot at that, you guys?
Please do.
Well, let me say this. It is a critical statement to the world to get back into Paris immediately, and Vice President Biden said he'd do that immediately. And that is a statement about intention. But the United States only puts out 15% of the greenhouse gases in the world, and that means that 85% of the greenhouse gases that are emitted come from overseas. And it means that if we're going to solve this global problem, it's going to have to be solved globally. And global problems don't get solved in the real world without American leadership. We can't do it alone. We have to have partners. But they can't do it without us either. And that's one of the reasons that Joe Biden is such a fantastic candidate. He's talking about pulling people together in the first 100 days from around the world to talk about climate. That's a step. But I think more than that, if we're going to go back to leading the world, we have to show that we're doing the right thing ourselves. If you think about it, how do you ask someone to do something that you're not willing to do? And so this Build Back Better plan and this clean energy plan are critical steps for getting us on the right path, but they're also critical steps to giving Vice President Biden the credibility around the world to go to China, to go to India, to go to Brazil, to go to Russia, to go around the world and say, we have to solve this together. We're doing our part. We'll help you do your part, but we absolutely have to do it together. And that's one of the reasons that he's a great candidate. He's got the experience. The Obama-Biden administration did Paris. They led Paris. They did an amazing job. He's got the experience. He's got the contacts. And we're going to have a UN conference in November of 2021 that is going to be like having a term paper due date. We're going to have to show up in concert with other people. We're going to have to be prepared. So what Lonnie's talking about, what Cecilia's talking about, what Steph is talking about in terms of what we need to accomplish domestically, that's what's going to enable us to put everybody else on their front foot and together for us to move past Paris, which we absolutely have to do, and address a crisis that is human at its base, but it's got a scientific root, and do the exact opposite of what's happened in COVID in the United States of America. Actual presidential leadership, actual foresight, and the kind of human touch that Joe Biden excels at. That's what's going to take to solve the problem internationally, and we've got the right candidate to do it.
Thank you, Tom. Lonnie, I have a question coming in for you, and this is from the U.S. Green Building Council. we have to motivate owners to invest in existing buildings and significantly reduce their carbon footprint. How is this playing out for you? And are there policies that the Biden administration hopes to implement in this area?
Yeah, actually, I think that's part of his, Build Back Better. As we continue to move more into, really there's going to be more demand in electricity in a lot of ways. If you think about the auto industry, if that converts and we start going to electric vehicles, which as we do that, we need to have those jobs, those vehicles need to be built here in the United States and built under union labor. We got to make sure that we're protecting those jobs, that we've got an opportunity to have those jobs in this country. And the same with all aspects. The 500,000 charging stations are going to have to be installed across the country. Going into the building, there's going to be a lot of retrofit work that will go on. Going into buildings, that were built years ago that weren't built under the same standards as some of the current buildings, and they don't have some of the environmental controls. And so it'll be a lot of work just going in and doing retrofit on existing building, and also the buildings of the future will be designed in such a way that they'll be self-sufficient in many ways in how they utilize energy.
If I might,
Cecilia, did you want to? I see you unmuting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wholeheartedly support what President Stevenson just said. And then specifically in his plan, the Vice President has as a top priority to upgrade 4 million buildings and weatherize 2 million homes over 4 years. That's a significant investment, and it's a significant investment as has been stated for an infrastructure and a building envelope, particularly in communities that have had disinvestment happen in their places. So we're playing catch up in some communities, and we're actually, by mobilizing this investment, 4 million buildings is not a small matter. And the kind of greenhouse gas reductions that we can have in that, but also just as importantly, the quality of life, the health, the safety, the well-being of our families, the externalities that come from that are enormous. We have homes that are still have lead paint in them. We have all these issues that are really problematic. And by upgrading our buildings, we cover a number of issues. I think also the fact that he's very much interested and has put as part of his plank to build the efficient appliance manufacturing supply chain. That's critical if we're going to continue to move out and replace our older, inefficient appliances. And as Lonnie has mentioned, make sure that those are union, well-paying, safe jobs.
Thank you, Cecilia. Tom, the next one will be for you. We have a couple of questions coming in around fossil fuels and the jobs that are in fossil fuels. This coming in from Anand Shah in Lehigh, Pennsylvania, and something along the same lines from Tom Wolf at Silicon Strategies in Utah. There are 9.8 million jobs in the oil industry, they noted. And if the future is dictating that we have to move towards renewable energy, how do we ease the transition? And we also know that exporting oil, this question from Tom, is reducing the need for us to go to war over oil, in his opinion. So if we are going to do that and reduce oil, how are we going to manage those? What are the plans for the Biden administration to help ease this transition and also help keep us secure?
Yes. Well, Danielle, let me start by saying this is an absolutely critical question, because this goes right to the heart of the Build Back Better plan, and it goes right to the heart of the values at the center of Joe Biden and the values at the center of this campaign. So let me start with a 30,000-foot view, but that's not where I want to end up. And I want to make sure when this is over that I give Lonnie Stevenson a chance to talk about this, because he's somebody who has dedicated his life to answering this question in effect. So let me say this. We know that the growth in clean energy jobs is faster than in fossil fuels. We know that the Build Back Better plan will create net millions of jobs across this country. When you talk about what Cecilia was talking about upgrading 4 million commercial buildings, weatherizing 2 million homes, building 1.5 million homes, rebuilding the grid, 1 million jobs in the auto industry, building clean rail around this country. That's millions of net jobs. It's not millions of jobs. It's millions of net jobs when you take out the job loss. I could say that, and I could point out in 42 states and the District of Columbia, there are more clean energy jobs than oil jobs. But that's not the point. And that's not where I said that's the 30,000 foot point, but that isn't where this campaign's about. Joe Biden cares about every single one of those people with a job. When I was talking earlier, I said, I've never heard him talk about energy. I've never heard him talk about climate without saying, we respect the dignity of every working person and his or her right to earn a living and provide for their family. And so every single time he is aware that if industries decline and people lose their jobs, that is a tragedy for them, that they have absolute rights and they have absolute dignity. And he is going to work to make sure that every part of that. Cecilia talked about some of the specific plans to mitigate that. But I think the biggest thing to know is that's at the top of his mind. And to me, it's that commitment that says, everything changes in this world, but values don't change. And that's at the heart of this campaign, is a candidate who absolutely his whole life has put those people first and is not going to change that under any circumstances after he's elected president. But Lonnie, I want to make sure that I kick this over to you because, as I said, you've spent a lifetime answering that question with integrity.
Thank you, Tom. And, this is a discussion with the fossil fuels oil industry, as there's transformation, like our members that we have that currently work in coal generating plants right now. As time moves on and energy continues to shift to more renewables, but like I said in the beginning, we still have to have reliable baseload energy. And so there needs to be really an all of the above or a mixture right now. Nuclear is zero emissions. Nuclear energy can be a great source to be that base load, especially the new generation of nuclear that is coming out, these modular units, they call them. But even in the coal industry, the carbon capture technologies where, if we can reduce the coal to get it to where there's clean emissions, we think everything should be on the table for discussion. Like I said before, because, right now I think we're having some outages up on the West Coast. And when there's those peak demands for power, we've got to be able to have, a backup system that's going to be there that it's going to pick up the low demands when they happen, because they will happen. And an example, years ago, we were building these peaker stations all across northern Illinois, and they were natural gas. And they only ran during the peak part of the summer and the heat of the summer when everybody's run the air conditioning, and they could fire those units up, run them long enough to get through that demand, and then back them off again. There has to be reliable baseload in the entire picture moving forward, and how that transition gets there. Again, we've got to get the power and the resources. Wind and solar generally are out in rural areas. We have to have the transmission grid to be able to get it from point A to point B where the demands are. And so all that, the infrastructure of the grid is paramount, and be able to move forward in this initiative as well and be successful.
Great. Thank you very much, Lonnie. My next question is for Cecilia. One of the hallmarks that you talked about in your opening remarks of this campaign has been listening to leaders from across the country, and that's going to need to continue. We know the philanthropy sector plays a critical role in helping those organizations that represent those being hit first and worst by climate change, in getting them to be part of the process. Do you have thoughts about how we can move forward with more inclusive decision making?
Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, that's a really important question. I think one of the wonderful things that have happened, and I think the Vice President's plan definitely symbolizes and embodies this, is that in order to move forward on bold new ideas, creative and innovative ideas, you need people at the table. You need folks who are experiencing the problems. You need the workers who are in those day-to-day jobs, who may be threatened by economic transition or other kinds of issues. You need communities who are experiencing the pollution, who are living in housing that is substandard, to be able to come to the table and show and share their knowledge and information, and be able to be creative about the solutions that are being brought forward. And I think philanthropy has played a critical role in the past in being able to support through investment of resources to ensure that people have, in communities, particularly community-based organizations, have those resources to be at the table. I think in the climate and energy field, we are seeing a shift, and we are thrilled at that now we see equity being a center point of resources in philanthropy, where that wasn't necessarily there in the past. And I think we saw the results in the past in terms of not having equity at that center point. And so whether it's around workers, whether it's around communities, whether it's around families, children, philanthropy can really invest in making sure that community organizations and other groups that are helping to build the capacity of these individuals to be able to participate at the table is critically important. It's really what democracy is all about, is that we all get to participate in the decisions that are made by and for us.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. And Tom, as someone who has been very engaged in the philanthropic sector, we know there are a lot of ideas and resources being invested by philanthropy as well on the technology side, on the inclusion side. Any comments you want to add on that point?
Well, I don't think I can improve on what Cecilia just said. I think that she said something really well that is absolutely important about participation, inclusion, diversity, what a Biden administration would look like. But I think beyond that, I want to make one other point, which is this. I applaud the philanthropic community for what they've done in this area, the research they've done, the people they've backed, the broadened vision that they've enabled. But the answer to this problem, for the specific environmental justice problems, to make sure that working people get a fair break in this society, is going to be on the government. And so when I think about, Cecilia's here as a representative broadly of people across America, but if you go to those communities and you see somebody who's been poisoned, who is sick, who may die, which I have some friends in that situation, we need rules to protect them. We need laws to protect them. If we're going to spend $2 trillion in the next 4 years in terms of all the investment we're talking about making, that has to come from the government. We need to come together as a people and get the government that the people of the United States deserve. And so I applaud philanthropy. I really do. I think people have gone out of their way, and Cecilia said it perfectly in terms of some of the best things that they've done. But ultimately, we need to come together broadly as people and rely on ourselves and get the kind of leadership that the people of the United States deserve.
Thank you very much, Tom. Absolutely, we need a government we deserve, and we certainly see, and in the midst of this year in particular, how critical it is to make sure that you have a government that is working. Lonnie, we haven't talked a lot about the transportation sector, and I know that you've given that area a lot of thought as we look at this transition. Might you have any comments for us on that? I'm going to take moderator's privilege and channel my inner Oprah, ask you that question.
Yeah, just briefly, I think the Vice President's plan, he already talks about converting the school buses and things of that nature to electric vehicles. As we continue to have that transition to more electric vehicles, like I said, there's other opportunities. There's not only building those buildings, those vehicles, building the batteries that are installed and run those vehicles. I think looking at transportation overall, look at the rail industry, high-speed rail, electric rail. I had the opportunity a few years ago to visit China and ride on one of their high-speed rails systems. And it was like floating. It's amazing how they've got their transportation. So we're behind a lot of countries when it comes to moving freight and moving people in a faster and more efficient way across the country. And this can be an avenue as we transition to that as well.
Danielle, I'm not sure we can hear you.
I apologize for that. Sorry to take myself off mute. No, I'm just so struck by the level of expertise and passion on this panel. And it really previews the kind of administration that the Biden-Harris community will put together, where we're bringing together the best of thoughts from all different sectors. And so, Steph, let me ask you the final question here before we go to closing remarks. This comes from Linton Way in Chevy Chase, Maryland. How can the climate crisis be made a top issue for the general American population?
Yeah, Linton, thank you so much for the question. And thanks again, Danielle. I think two ways, though they say never to number your points. The first is by talking about climate change in the moment and talking about jobs. I think that talking about climate change as an opportunity allows you to break through with people who might not come from the issue or be naturally inclined to care about the issue, despite its obvious, apparent, immediate public health impacts and the impacts to come. So I really do believe that this frame of using climate as a job opportunity is really good for reaching a wider net of people who to get them to care about the issue. And second, and related, I think listening to people and having them at the table and making sure that a climate agenda speaks to the different communities affected by it is essential in order to rally enough political movement to get something done, because it will be a big challenge and we need everyone at the table to fight for this. I think that is something that Vice President Biden has perhaps uniquely accomplished. You know, when he put out his plan last month, it received the support of environmental groups like the Sierra Club and the League of Conservation Voters, environmental justice leaders, as well as unions, including IBEW, United Auto Workers, AFL. That's not something that you see happen often. And I think that really speaks to Vice President Biden's capacity, not just to persuade people to come on board, but to really listen to them and figure out how we make this work for everyone. And that's the type of leadership we need in the White House to tackle a challenge as urgent as the climate crisis. So we need your help, Linton, and everyone else out there listening, to help get the word out about Vice President Biden's plans and to help get your friends, your neighbors, your community members on board in recognizing that this is a top priority in order to pull our economy out of an economic recession and make sure that we are building back in a way that tackles the climate crisis head on. So I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Steph. Tom, let's close out by giving you the opportunity to give your final remarks, and just a huge thank you again to the whole panel. Tom?
Danielle, thanks. And thank you for a very able job of controlling this panel. Steph, thank you. Cecilia and Lonnie, thank you so much. It is always an honor to participate with you guys in anything. And let me just start by saying that as a climate voter and as an American, I am thrilled by our team. I love the values, I love the vision, I love the leadership. I am all in. But it's more than that this year. We cannot afford not to win. As Steph said, we're in a crisis. Yes, we're in a climate crisis, but we're also in a COVID crisis. We're in a racial justice crisis. We're a gigantic economic crisis. Our democracy is on the line. Every American is a hostage to the disaster that is the Trump administration. Now we have the leader, we have the vision, but now we have to make it happen between now and November 3rd. Let me say this about this panel. This panel reflects the diversity of people, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of experience, diversity of geography that reflects this campaign, but also reflects this country. And let me say why I have loved this panel and why I've loved working with these people. We're of one mind. We have each other's backs. If you listen to this panel, you heard Cecilia supporting Lonnie, Lonnie supporting Steph. Nobody supported me, it's true, but that's okay. No, this is a team. You guys, and honestly, it's moving to me. This is what America is supposed to be like. There is no daylight between the people on this panel. This is our time to make history together. This is our time to elect a transformational president together. And this is our time. And this might be our last chance to save the world together. So we have a very simple message. Steph said it. Let's get out there. Let's do it. Let's win, and let's win big.
Thank you, Tom. I've just been so energized by this panel, and thank you all again. To build back that, this is the kind of team we need. That's all the time we have. I'd like to again thank our panelists for a great discussion on this critical climate crisis issue, and a huge thank you to the host committee sponsors and the campaign for their support in organizing these policy roundtables. Lastly, of course, thank you for joining us today. Goodbye.